On today's episode of the Fitness Pain Free Show, we're going over programming and periodization basics. This is part 4 on our series of programming and periodization. If you missed 1, 2, and 3 prior to this, I'll leave a link in the show notes that's in the description. Go listen to those and then listen to this one. Before we get going, I do have a freebie. It's an evidence-based guide to programming and periodization. It's a cheat sheet. You know I love to make these cheat sheets. I've taken all of the most important principles of today's lesson. I put them together in a nice PDF. Give you all the bullet points. This is 100% free. I'll put a link in the show notes in the description. Go ahead and check that out and download it. 100% free. It's going to help you a lot, both as we go through this presentation and later if you want to check back and say, oh, what the heck did Dan say 3 months ago, whenever you need it. Welcome to the Fitness Pain Free Show. This is where we help coaches and clinicians like yourself get your patients out of pain and back in the gym where they belong. So what are some practical takeaways for physical therapists? Let's say we take a typical powerlifter that has low back pain. And let's say they typically train 4 days per week and they utilize an upper body, lower body split. So they're going to have 2 days that are squat and deadlift emphasis and 2 days that are more bench press emphasis. When it comes to the upper body, they don't have to change much of anything. So you may find in the bench press, it hurts to have an aggressive arch. And a lot of folks with low back pain that are powerlifters may not tolerate that. But let's say this individual is fine. It doesn't hurt to arch in the bench press, so we don't have to modify anything on their upper body days. In terms of the lower back, let's say they're not tolerating heavy loads on both the squat as well as the deadlift, which is very common you'll see with athletes. So a lot of folks might come to you with low back pain and you take them through an evaluation and they're not that irritable, but it only really hurts when they get above, let's say 80, 85% of the 1 rep max, then they can't really push. So what happens is that they can't push those higher loads as they're approaching their 3 reps, 1 rep maxes. So they're coming to you because they want to get out of pain. They're looking to improve their 1 rep maxes. So bench press, squat, and deadlift. Obviously the squat and the deadlift are problematic right now. And let's say they also want to get a little bit bigger. So their goals are not only to build strength, but also hypertrophy. So let's say you go ahead and do their evaluation and you find that back squatting just isn't going really well, right? So you load up their back squat. It just starts to really bother them, hurt them so much they can't really load the squat that well. So you go about trying a few modifications, and it turns out that front squats feel quite a bit more comfortable, although you can't go too heavy with them quite yet, right? Bunch of research to show that strength training is helpful for low back pain. So my powerlifter wants to get out of low back pain and wants to power lift. It's a no-brainer that we prescribe squats to help them get out of pain. So utilizing a front squat does 2 things. It's going to allow them to get out of pain. And 2, it's going to keep them working towards their training goals. Maybe not as well as working on a back squat, but it's pretty dang close. The problem with offloading the squat completely is there's going to be a deconditioning effect. So if you have the same athlete that comes in, hurts the squat, and you keep them from squatting, they're probably going to get better over the course of time with some sort of other exercise. It's just that they're also going to get weaker. So every time I'm still able to work towards someone's training goals and simultaneously rehab them, I'm going to take that opportunity. Plus, this person really wants to power lift. If I'm giving them powerlifting exercises, it's going to help them. They're going to feel better. They're reaching towards their goals, right? And they're much more likely to do the program. So let's take a snapshot of a program that I write for this individual. Let's say their day 1 is their squat emphasis day. On this day, I'm going to prescribe front squats because we found they felt pretty good. And I'm also going to increase the rep range. We talked a little bit earlier that this person is load intolerant. So largely, they just don't tolerate 5 rep maxes, 3 rep maxes, 1 rep maxes. So we're bringing those repetitions up. So for that first month, I'm prescribing front squats, and I'm prescribing 4 sets of 12 repetitions. I'm using a 4 rep in reserve. So a couple things here. I have 12 reps. It's actually very high for a powerlifter. A lot of powerlifters are going to roll their eyes at you, but if you tell them like, hey, this is going to help you long term, they'll probably end up doing it, right? So 12 repetitions, the reason why I chose this is because you can't use as much weight when the reps get higher. This person's load intolerant, so obviously we're dropping that load simply by increasing the repetitions. So I really don't know what the best intensity to hit the like button is or to hit the subscribe button, but I feel like you should do it right now. So go ahead and hit that. It helps me out tremendously. The next part is I'm using a rep in reserve. We just talked extensively that if you reduce the rep in reserve, you still are going to improve at a very similar rate than if you were training to failure. And when we're lowering the RPE or increasing the rep in reserve, we're also decreasing the load. This person isn't tolerating loading well, so we're taking the load down in a variety of ways. So one of which being the exercise modification, front squat. Second of which is going to be raising the reps. And third of which is going to be increasing the rep in reserve or reducing the RPE. Let's say your athlete goes through the program for 4 weeks and they come back to you and say, the program really went really well. My back's feeling pretty good. I'm ready for the next step. Okay. So we're trying to periodize for these folks, right? Because we know periodization is going to increase their strength, increase their hypertrophy, both of which are major goals for the athletes in front of you. So I'm going to use a linear periodization model. I think that's the easiest type of periodization to apply. And it's very, very simple. So on month 2, all I'm doing is I'm changing the modification slightly. We're going from a front squat to a back squat. And the reason why I'm doing this is because the back squat is closer to the competitive lift. However, I'm using a high bar back squat. Reason being is that generally speaking with a high bar, you're a little bit more upright. It's a little bit easier on the spine than a low bar. And this person is not quite at the point where they're able to tolerate low bar back squatting. So we are dialing up the intensity just by making the variation we choose a little more challenging for the spine. The second thing that we're doing is we are very slightly reducing the repetitions. So as opposed to doing 4 sets of 12 in the first month, now we're doing 4 sets of 10. I just knocked off 2 repetitions from their set. Now, what this does is it naturally is going to increase the load slightly, okay? So we're going from sets of 12 to sets of 10. From a periodization standpoint, this is good. We're following linear periodization. The back is getting a little bit better over the course of time. We're getting closer and closer to the patient's goals. I am still utilizing a rep in reserve. We started with a 4 rep in reserve. This month, we're doing a 3 rep in reserve. So that's naturally going to dial up the intensity a little bit more. So now their loads are getting more and more week after week, month after month. So this style of linear periodization works extremely well for folks that have pain because largely we start with a higher volume, lower intensity, which is tolerated very well for most spines. And then we start to go down slowly over the course of time, a little less volume, a little bit more intensity. Let's say your athlete is doing really well. They come back at month 3. They're ready for the next set of exercises. And what you decide to do is go back to a low bar back squat. They've made a lot of progress over the course of time. You've tested them a little bit. You try the back squat in a low bar position, and it actually feels pretty dang comfortable. So we can start to load a little bit more here. We're still following our linear periodization. So we started with 4 sets of 12. Second month, 4 sets of 10. This month, we're going to go down to 4 sets of 8. And really all we're doing is increasing that intensity very slowly over the course of time, which is nice for that spine because it likes slow, consistent changes in intensity, which allows us to rehab over the course of time well. I'm also messing around with a rep in reserve again. So now we're down to a 2 rep in reserve. So you can see the intensity is going to get more and more and more over the course of time as the patient gets better. So as we make more progress over the course of time, largely I just start to take the intensity, slowly ramp it up, and take the volume and slowly ramp it down. And that's one of the tenets of linear periodization. So at month 4, we're doing low bar back squats. We're doing 5 sets of 5 at a 2 rep in reserve. Month 5, we're doing a low bar back squat, 5 sets of 3 at a 1 rep in reserve. And then month 6, we're doing a low bar back squat with 5 sets of 1 at a 0 rep in reserve. So largely we'd be peaking for either a meet or this person wants to PR within their training environment, whatever it is. But you can see very naturally from month to month, we're just dialing up the intensity. And we do that by reducing the rep in reserve and lowering the repetitions. Simply just by taking the repetitions lower and lower over the course of time, the volume is going to go down naturally with that. So what you did is you took a powerlifter that was load intolerant. We started with a lot of volume. We periodized very well, and we slowly reduced the volume over the course of time. We increased the intensity, linear periodization. This person is now able to do a 1 rep max, really push their strength. They're happy because they got out of pain, but we also were able to use these periodization principles in order to maximize their strength improvements over the course of time, maximize hypertrophy, all that good stuff to really maximize our patient's strength over the course of time. So guys, if you like what you're learning about so far, then I want you to go and check out the Fitness Pain-Free Mini Course. So I made a mini course. It's absolutely free. That's the next logical step if you want to learn more from me. So in the course, we go over 5 lessons. That first lesson is how traditional schooling has failed us, right? So schooling is phenomenal from a physical therapy perspective, but doesn't really teach you how to work with high-level athletes in the fitness world, right? Doesn't always teach you how to do the lifts appropriately. Doesn't teach you about progressions and regressions of common lifts within the gym. Doesn't teach you how to program normally, how to write rehab programs, or how to write injury prevention programs for these folks. Next thing we go over, 7 reasons why people get hurt in the gym, 4 simple steps to getting your clients out of pain, how to build the career of your dreams and earn the respect of your community. It's all well and good if you know exactly how to work with folks within the gym. But if you can't get these folks through the door on a regular basis, then you're simply not going to be living the dream that you want to, because you can't get the patients through the door that you want to work with. Okay, so I'll show you how to do that. Let's get back to the show now. All right, so largely that was just the squat, okay? When someone comes in for a program from you so they can keep powerlifting and rehab at the same time, you're probably not going to give them one exercise. We're probably going to give them a full program, right? So how do we use programming and periodization to maximize their outcome over the course of time? Well, they largely want to get bigger and they want to get stronger. So from a hypertrophy standpoint, how can we maximize their muscle mass? How can we use set and rep principles to maximize this? Well, for the lower back, hamstrings, and quads, and these are all areas I want to improve from a strengthening perspective. Obviously, the lower back and the hips are going to be important because we need those to lift heavy weights, and they're currently painful. So applying exercises is going to get them stronger, but it's also going to help to rehab the spine. We also want to train the quads because those are big time helper muscles within the squat. So if my quads aren't strong enough, I'm going to overutilize my low back and hip musculature potentially. So it's important that I get the quads going as well. They're the helpers. And we can utilize a rep range that we know to be very effective to increase hypertrophy. So I largely am selecting somewhere between 12 and 20 total sets for this athlete to maximize the hypertrophy of these muscles. We're also going to be using the SAID principle, so specific adaptations to impose demands. What do I mean by that? We want to choose exercises that we know are helpful to build the squat as well as to build the deadlift. Okay, so from an exercise selection standpoint, I'm going to be utilizing good mornings, belt squats, reverse hyperextensions, 45-degree back extensions, all exercises we know that are both very helpful for reducing low back pain, but also are very helpful to help build the squat and the deadlift. What's really cool is that we can do both of these things at once and really help our powerlifters out. How about intensities? So largely with accessory exercises, we're usually not going super low in terms of our repetitions. However, we know that the closer we approach 1 rep max, the more strength we're going to build. Trouble is, our athlete is not tolerating really heavy weights in the very beginning of the rehab. So usually what we start with is going to be a higher volume and a lower intensity. So what that means is that when we're choosing set and rep ranges, we're going to be starting with maybe 3 sets of 10, right? 4 sets of 12, something that's north of 8 repetitions. And over the course of time, we can lower those repetitions down, maybe work our way down to sets or 6 or so. We don't have to go crazy heavy, right? It's an accessory movement. However, we still want to creep a little bit closer into that 5 rep range just because the patient's main goal is to build strength for the deadlift and the squat. We can also dose intensity by choosing a rep in reserve that is initially a little bit easier. So let's say we start with a 4 rep in reserve, and over the course of time, we just make that rep in reserve less and less and less. Again, they're accessory exercises. We don't have to go bananas here, but we can very easily start with a 4 rep in reserve and work our way to a 2 rep in reserve over the course of time as the spine starts to improve and it just tolerates more and more. So what do we do with frequency in this person's exercise program? So largely they're already doing an upper lower split, which means they're hitting their lower body 2 times per week. One of my goals for these athletes is to try to stress the spine or the injured area 3 days per week. And this is largely just because a lot of our literature will show that folks are getting exercises somewhere between 3 times a week and maybe upwards of every single day. And that seems to be helpful from a dosing perspective. In my mind, 2 days a week might not be enough. And the other piece is that if we're doing 2 very big lower back intensive days per week, you might leave your athlete pretty dang sore after each session just because it's a big spike of volume every time they go in the gym. So what I'd rather do is spread out the volume across 3 days, which ends up being a little nicer for that person's spine. So we just give them a 3rd day where we work in some of these lower body exercises on one of the upper body days. I also like to try to have a day's rest between sessions if able. I just think that's helpful to allow the spine to kind of chill and relax a bit. We're not hitting back-to-back days, doing too much and getting excessively sore or painful. So how about rest periods? Well, we just learned that longer rest periods are more beneficial for strength and hypertrophy. My patient in front of me wants to get bigger and they want to get stronger. So I should probably utilize longer rest periods. So generally 3+ minutes in between sets. Now, one of the things that I use in order to be more efficient in the gym and still try to get a longer rest period are supersets. So one of the things that we can do is we can take a lower body intensive movement and superset that with something that doesn't take up too much energy or stress the same muscle group, right? So if I'm doing, let's say, a deadlift in the gym, in between sets, maybe I can do some arm work, something to be a little bit more efficient, add a little bit more total volume to the person's program because that's beneficial, works in line with their goals, but allows them to get their workout done in a reasonable amount of time. And what are we doing from an exercise order perspective? So our two main goals are going to be strength first and then followed up by hypertrophy, right? And our patient doesn't really care about their knee extension 1 rep max. They care about their squat 1 rep max, right? So in terms of which exercise go first in the program, it's obviously going to be the squat variation or the deadlift variation, right? And those movements that are used more for hypertrophy are going to be a little bit later in the session. And that's for 2 reasons. One, the person doesn't care about hypertrophy as much as they care about strength. They're trying to build their 1 rep max and squat and the deadlift. They're a powerlifter. That's what they really want. Second piece is that from hypertrophy standpoint, doesn't really matter which exercises go first, right? So if this individual is going to do 45-degree back extensions and they're going to do squats, generally speaking, it shouldn't matter which order you put them in to maximize hypertrophy, right? But if they're trying to build their squat maximally, if we put back extensions first, that's actually going to limit the amount of weight that you can use in their back squat, okay? So obviously, we're just going to squat and deadlift first within the program, and then after that, we have our accessory movements. So now you know how to periodize for an athlete that has low back pain, but you still don't know the good exercises to get them out of pain. However, I have a really nice video that's going to show you exactly how to do that. So I want you to go ahead and click a link. I think it's in that corner over there. And you can go over 5 great exercises for low back pain. I'll see you on that video. If you guys want to check out the references, I know you can't see them right now. They're too tiny. I really delved through the literature on this one. I'm a nerd about this stuff. I love it. If you want to check those out, again, link in the show notes, all right, in the description. Check those out. Leave a comment. If you think any of these studies are stupid, great. Let me know. I want to hear it. And again, thank you so much for your support. It's truly folks like you that allow me to do what I love for a living. I really mean that. It's so cool that I get to learn and share and grow as a physical therapist, share the information for you. And because of that, I can support my own career. Awesome. If you want to go that extra step and really support me, hit that like button, leave a comment and subscribe. It helps with the algorithm. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, please consider leaving a 5-star review because the podcast is amazing. Plus, it also helps me out tremendously. If you want to take your learning to the next level, I recommend subscribing to Fitness Pain-Free Insiders. It is an online library for strength and fitness professionals who want to master working with injuries in the gym. All this information is updated by me every month for the past 5 years ago. You get started for just $1. Great information. Definitely go check it out.